Well, good morning, everybody. Happy Monday morning to all of you. I am Andrew Langer in for Larry O'Connor today. Good morning, Julie Gunlock.
Good morning.
Julie is recovered nicely from her trip in today. By the way, if you're all out there on the roads, I hope you're being careful. We're in studio, so we can't quite see what's going on.
A lot of people at home are probably excited. They wake up to snow.
Yes, it snowed, and also there are delays and school delays, so glad you're joining us here as you're waiting for the kids to go off to school and you can go off to work. But it is 8:07 a.m. right here on News Talk 105.9 WMAL. We are making sense of the news. We're going to be joined later on in the show by Congressman Ben Cline from Virginia's 6th Congressional District. I'm going to find out how much snow he got out there. They're getting out there today. But joining us right now, Tom Fitton. He is the head of Judicial Watch, a great organization doing ultra important work in Washington, D.C. And so Tom, you guys had a bit of a victory with D.C., removing 103,000 ineligible names from the voter rolls. Listen, all I want to know is the woman who ran for governor a couple of years back in Maryland, Krish Vignarajah, is she still on the voter rolls in D.C., or is she finally on the voter rolls in Maryland only?
Well, I hope she's been removed,
Yes.
depending on her state or jurisdiction of residence. Yeah. But I tell you, we didn't even have to sue to get these names cleaned up. We had warned and talked to D.C. about this issue, and in response, they last month sent us a letter. They said, look, we removed 65,000. They're gone. 37,000 will be gone, so it's well over 100,000. And on top of that, over the next few years, it looks like another 73,000 are going to be removed. And what the law is at the federal level, the National Voter Registration Act, requires states to take reasonable steps to clean up the rolls. That means generally, if you don't vote in a federal election, they're supposed to ask you, knock, knock, are you still there? And if you don't answer directly or vote in the next 2 federal elections, they have to remove you. And D.C. didn't do that, evidently. And that's why we sent them a notice of violation letter, because, removing names because Judicial Watch is asking you questions, that's not a process, right? That's ad hoc. And on top of that, we have California and Illinois also not removing names in the last 2 years or so, which is obviously another major issue because the counties in California, I think, comprise of 14 million voters, and they haven't, practically speaking, the data shows they haven't done anything in the last few years. Illinois, similarly, in Chicago and Cook County, which is where the bulk of their voters are.
Wow.
So we just keep on pushing, and in D.C., it led to 15% of the voter list being cleaned up.
Well, Tom, let me think. D.C., Illinois, specifically Cook County and California, what do those things have in common? Democrat, obviously, run areas. What is the consequence? Is there any consequence for these states and the District of Columbia not doing what they are federally required to do? Is there anything that can be done aside from what your wonderful organization is doing? Are there any other consequences?
Yeah, that's a good question. The consequence would be a federal lawsuit, right? And they would have to abide by the lawsuit in Kentucky. There was a consent decree. The Justice Department doesn't do this work. I mean, the law's there. The Justice Department's supposed to enforce it, but they've completely gone AWOL on this because the left doesn't want to clean up voter rolls. They don't like doing it because, in my view, they want unclean voter rolls because it provides opportunities for voter fraud. Now, the fact that these names were on the list, does it mean that they were all fraudulent voters? No. But what it does mean is they had names who were ineligible to vote. They had likely moved away or died or something like that. And that's a pool from which fraudsters can dip if they want to vote in someone else's name, especially in jurisdictions, in my view, the risk is heightened, like D.C., Illinois, California, and too many other states that don't have any voter ID. So you could show up and vote in someone else's name. It's much easier to do that without voter ID. And of course, if you're mailing in ballots, all bets are off in some of these places because they, all you have to do is sign a form or less to get your vote counted via mail.
It's interesting, Tom. Earlier on in the show, we were talking about this business owner, a guy named Bill Penzi, who runs a spice business, and I'd gotten into it with him about the issue of election integrity. This is a year ago. Election integrity and back and forth, and he was going on and on and on and how difficult it is for people to get out to vote and to get voter ID, and we make it impossible for them to vote. And I turned around and I asked him, I said, well, okay, you believe this, you're a business owner. Do you give your employees a day off to vote? Do you shut down your business for a day? And he never wrote me back. Thus endeth the issue. It just seems to me that what Democrats obviously use this as a pretext. Anytime you sort of poke holes in their theories about voter rolls and election integrity, they really have no place to go, do they? Except they finally have to admit that what they're doing is they have to admit that they need to make these changes, don't they?
Oh yeah, I mean we've settled with jurisdictions like New York City, L.A. County, the state of California. They obviously haven't followed through adequately. Jurisdictions in Pennsylvania to clean up the rolls. North Carolina, I think that was a Democrat Secretary of State. So these aren't issues where really anyone can disagree with us. I mean, New York City, thanks to Judicial Watch, moved 440,000 names. L.A. County, 1.2 million names. So we're getting the names cleaned up. And no matter who you are, Democrat or Republican, no one can argue that you leave names for forever and a day on your rolls, whether or not they're living there and haven't voted.
Yeah. We are talking with Tom Fitton from Judicial Watch. So we've got this impeachment inquiry vote coming up in the House. Your thoughts, Tom?
Oh, I'm surprised it took so long. This to me, if I were Speaker of the House or in the position influencing the House, I would have had him impeached already.
Yeah.
So the impeachment inquiry obviously is necessary, but it's not sufficient in terms of accountability. This Justice Department can't be trusted to issue a jaywalking ticket. You can see even with this Hunter Biden investigation where they list all the bribes Hunter took, but refused to prosecute him for bribes because that would bring in Joe.
Yeah.
But the indictment itself, for those of you who haven't read it, detail all the money Hunter was getting from Burisma, China, Romania, that he didn't pay taxes on, and of course left unsaid is why was he getting all that crazy money, right? And everyone knows it was because of his relationship, and they were leveraging Joe's position with Joe's acquiescence and participation to raise these monies.
What are you talking about, Tom? He's a brilliant artist. He deserves that money for his brilliance and his artistry.
Yeah, exactly. And the money. It's interesting. In Burisma, they cut his salary in half, according to the federal indictment, after Joe lost the vice presidency.
Interesting. I'm shocked. I can't imagine why they would have done it. Listen, Tom, we got to leave it there. Thank you very much for the good work that you guys are doing at Judicial Watch.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Andrew.